Hi everyone. In this lecture, we're going to be talking about something that you already know something about, and that is the human body. But going along with many of the other things that we've learned in previous lectures, we're going to take a look at the human body and kind of break it down into smaller pieces so that we can understand. To begin with, we know what cells are. Okay, we've studied cells. And of course, human body cells would be what kind of cells? Would they be prokaryotic or eukaryotic, right? Eukaryotic, here's hoping you knew that. Because we, as humans, are in domain Eukarya, kingdom Animalia, and phylum Chordata, because we're vertebrates, right? And we're mammals. So we have cells. We know what cells are. Okay, that's the smallest unit of life. So we have our eukaryotic cells. When you put those cells together, you get tissues. So cells are the basic structure of all living things. When you have a group of cells working together, you have what is referred to as a tissue. When you have multiple tissues working together, we refer to that as an organ. And you can probably think of all of the organs or various organs that are in the human body. I mean, you have your brain, you have your heart, you have all of your muscles, you have your lungs, your pancreas, your kidneys. So all of those are organs. When we put multiple organs together, forming a unit working together collectively, we call that an organ system. Okay, and there are 11 major organ systems in the human body: the digestive, skeletal, muscular, respiratory, nervous, excretory, circulatory, endocrine, lymphatic, integumentary, and reproductive. So we're going to take a look at each one of these. So the digestive system. Well, before we even pull it up, everybody should know what the digestive system's purpose is. Okay. The digestive system's purpose is to take in raw material because we are what? Are we autotrophic or heterotrophic? Heterotrophic, right. So we're heterotrophic, so we have to pull in material. We have a digestive system. We have a complete digestive system. And if you remember from the lecture on animals, that means that we have two openings. So it begins in the mouth, where we have our teeth and our tongues and our salivary glands in order to get things going. Food, whatever we pull into our mouth, then is chewed up into a paste that then goes down our esophagus. So it passes to the stomach, the pharynx, which is this muscular pharynx right here, which is surrounding your throat. And it is a bolus that will move from the back of your mouth all the way down to your stomach by contracting the esophagus. There is a little flap of tissue called the epiglottis. This covers the trachea. When we're swallowing, the trachea leads to the lungs, and we definitely do not want food going to the lungs. So it flips back and forth. If we're breathing, then it closes the opening to the esophagus, and if we're chewing and swallowing, it closes the entrance to the trachea. Um, so we have that. It prevents food or air from going down the wrong passage, depending on which is which. Inside the stomach, we have gastric juices, which are primarily hydrochloric acid. A lot of enzymes that can exist without being denatured inside the stomach. The pH there is about 2, which is very acidic. And so it continues to break up all of the food product that you have. And so when you have this, it's completely broken up inside your stomach. Then what then happens is this mixture then leaves the stomach and goes into the small intestines, which is where most food digestion occurs, or most food absorption. So if we take a look here at our diagram here on the right hand side of your screen, what we have just done is we have chewed food, masticated it, turned it into a bolus. It then comes down the esophagus into the stomach, where it is churned and continued to further broken down, and now it has gone through out of the stomach and into the small intestine. So here we are in the small intestines. The small intestines is the longest, even though it's small in diameter, but it is the longer of the two intestines. Longer of the two intestines. And this is where most food absorption takes place. Secreting enzymes into the small intestines, we have the pancreas. So the pancreas, which is here, hold on, let me get my, all right. So here we have our pancreas, and that pancreas is going to secrete enzymes into, the small intestines. It also collects, you also collect enzymes coming from the liver, which is here, into the gallbladder, which is bile, and then that is secreted also into the small intestines in order to help digest food. So food does not go through the liver. The liver is actually secreting this bile, a substance that helps. It actually helps emulsify fats primarily. It's stored in the gallbladder, which is this green organ that's right here, and literally it is green. If you ever have an opportunity to take part in a gross anatomy course and take to look at what's inside a body, whether we're talking about a human or another mammal, the gallbladder is green because the bile itself is very green. And it is definitely clearly visible attached to the liver. Moving along, after substances are absorbed as much as they can possibly be absorbed in the small intestines, and what's left then moves into the large intestines. What's left moves into the large intestines, and it moves into the large intestines here. Then we have what is the ascending colon, the transverse colon, and the descending colon, which leads, of course, to the rectum and then finally the anus. This is the shorter of the two intestines. Okay, so the large intestines is the shorter of the two. Primarily, what's going to be happening in this large intestine, this is where most of the water, any water, is going to be reabsorbed in order from what's left of the food substances. You've absorbed most of the nutrients in your small intestines, because these small intestines, even though it's smaller in diameter, it's much longer. And so you've got a long way, and there's a lot of surface area, because inside the small intestines you have these little fingers that are called villi, that are just like protrusions of the wall inside the small intestines. And what that does is it increases the surface area. So there's lots and lots of surface area for absorption of nutrients. So once all of the water has been reabsorbed in the large intestines, what's left is a solid waste that then, of course, exits the body by way of the anus. So if we think about the nutrients that we have to take in carbohydrates, we have to take in fats, we have to take in proteins. And when we're taking in all of those things, we're also taking in a large amount of, we think about nitrogen, we have to take in a lot of nitrogen because we're building proteins. We take in that nitrogen also in the form of, you're going to have DNA. There's DNA in what you take in, which contains a lot of nitrogen too, because you're building DNA and you're building proteins, and so we need those raw materials. Carbohydrates, this is our primary energy source. Primary energy source is carbohydrates. Fats are our secondary energy source. This is also how we store energy. Protein, although I've listed here 4 kilocalories per gram, this is very difficult to break down. If your body is using proteins for energy, then you're starving to death. So you're actually breaking down your own muscle at that point. And of course, everybody always wants to say, well, I get a lot of energy when I eat a protein bar. Well, it may be called a protein bar, but if you look at the ingredients there, what you're going to find is that it's primarily carbohydrate, and that's where that energy is coming from. We also take in vitamins, which are essentially coenzymes. that are required in order for enzymes to do their job. Enzymes are proteins that help regulate metabolism, and what we refer to as vitamins literally are coenzymes. They help these enzymes do regulate our metabolism. We also take in minerals because we do require, now so when I say minerals, we're talking about essentially free elements because we do require many of these. Okay, magnesium, manganese, calcium, sodium, chlorine. So we're taking in these things because you do need potassium ions and chlorine ions and sodium ions. Without those, your nervous impulses and your muscular contraction won't happen. So we need those as well. And of course, water. We need water. Why do we need water? To keep us from getting thirsty. Yes, of course, but why? Why do you get thirsty? Why do you need water? You need water because, and this is important, you need to make sure that you take close note of this. I'll probably ask you this at some point in time later. Water is necessary for living organisms, including us, because all of the chemistry that takes place that is life, that keeps something living, takes place in an aqueous solution. That's why you need water. You need water because all of that chemistry that makes you a living thing requires water because it's taking place in an aqueous solution. So life takes place in an aqueous solution. That's why we need water. So if you take a look at a food pyramid, now this was done in 2005, but it does give you an idea of the basic things. And this kind of goes along with if you're going to be teaching health and whatnot like that. It is important for you to keep up with how many servings of various things is the daily recommended amount. Basic food groups, your grains, vegetables, fruits, meats, oils, and then of course exercise, which is not a food group, but it's something that you have to do or that you should be doing every day. And so we think more along the lines of this food pyramid, making sure that we get plenty of grains and plenty of vegetables and fruits. You don't need that many oils. Okay, so it's not good. It's better for you not to have as many oils. And then your dairy and meats. Now notice the meat, this is a very small amount. Now we are omnivorous. However, you don't need to maintain health. You're not really needing that much meat. You can actually get a great deal of the protein and other nutrients that you would be getting from meat. You can get that from many of the plants. Now I'm not advocating any one type of diet or anything like that, but moderation. Now notice also that this is one of the coolest things that the Food and Drug Administration has come out with in the past, I don't know how many years, was the idea of making sure that a plate is colorful. Now, not just the plate itself, but when you have colorful vegetables, that you have plenty of a variety of color, because that tends to force you to have fruits and vegetables, high amounts of fruits and vegetables and high amounts of grain on your plate. And that's a healthy diet. So I will leave it to you to take a look more closely at that. All right, so moving past the digestive system, we have the skeletal system. Typically, we talk about the skeletal system together with the musculature, but if we take a look at the skeletal system, notice that the pictures here and the images on your right, you've got part of the skeleton is colored red, part of the skeleton is colored green. That's because your skeleton is separated into two primary parts. You have the axial skeleton, which forms the axis of your body, which is the skull, the vertebral column, and the ribs. The skull, the vertebral column, and the ribs. And then you have the appendicular skeleton, which is made up of the appendages, your arms and their connection to the axis, and your legs and their connection to the axis. So you have two primary parts of your skeleton: the axial skeleton, which is the skull and the vertebral column and the ribs, and then your appendicular, or the appendages and their connection to the axis. The skeleton provides support and allows movement. Without your skeleton, your muscles wouldn't have anything to pull against. Whenever your musculature is working, it has to pull on your skeleton, otherwise you wouldn't be able to move. So if we didn't have a skeleton, then our muscles wouldn't have anything to pull against. This also serves as protection. Your skull is like a built-in helmet to protect your brain. Your ribs are a built-in protection to protect your heart and your lungs. So you've got built-in protection here. And then, of course, your vertebral column surrounds your spinal cord. The musculature system, or the muscular system, all of your muscles work in pairs. And what I've got here is the biceps and the triceps. Muscles can only contract. They don't pull, they don't push anything. They can only contract. So they work in pairs. When the bicep contracts, it causes your arm to flex. Okay? When the tricep contracts, which is down here, it causes your arm to extend. So every set of muscles in your body operate in a pair. Okay? So we have three different kinds of muscle, essentially. We have skeletal muscle, which is for movement. These are voluntary muscles. You have smooth muscle, which are not voluntary, and these are muscles that surround all of your organs. And you have cardiac muscle, which is, of course, your heart. Now, the heart itself is essentially an untiring muscle, but when you think about all of the contractions that are necessary to maintain, in order to continue to pump blood around your body, you got to think about your heart is not really getting fatigued like your other muscles will. The respiratory system is responsible for gas exchange. All living things have to have gas exchange of some sort. We take in a mixture of gas, which is primarily nitrogen, which we cannot use because it's into two nitrogen atoms that are bonded together. We can't do anything with that. But what we do take in that we can use, we have oxygen and carbon dioxide. Now, most of the atmosphere that you take in, like I said, is nitrogen. So it's roughly 79%. And then it's about 21%, give or take, oxygen. We are hardly efficient enough to extract all of the oxygen from that and to exhale nothing but carbon dioxide. So that doesn't happen. That's kind of a myth that people believe. The people have kind of oversimplified things. The air that you breathe out is only about 5 to 6% carbon dioxide, which means that there's still roughly, 16%, between 15 and 16% oxygen in the air that you breathe out. But we do have to have gas exchange because we have to take in oxygen. Why do we need oxygen? Not so that we can breathe. We breathe to take in oxygen. The oxygen that we take in is used for cellular respiration. Every one of the mitochondria in all of your cells needs that oxygen in order to oxidize sugars and generate ATP. And the process of cellular respiration then creates CO2 as a waste product, which then makes its way back to your lungs, and then you exhale. So breathing is a respiratory process. So we have our nose, mouth, and throat, and of course our lungs at the end of the trachea. At the end of the trachea, you have the two bronchi, and then that branches into bronchial tubes and so on and so forth. Now the lungs are not just like two big balloons at the end of the trachea. It is a very spongy material. If you ever felt a lung, it's going to be very spongy. It's going to feel like a sponge. It's got a lot of what feels like a lot of holes on the inside. Not really holes, because what you would have inside there are thousands and thousands, actually millions and millions of tiny little gas sacs called alveoli. They are one cell thick, and this is where gas exchange actually takes place. So those tiny sacs called alveoli, gas exchange is actually taking place there. So in the breathing process, you have a muscle called a diaphragm that sits at the bottom of your lungs, and when it contracts, it creates a vacuum in that space, which allows your lungs to fill up. And then when it relaxes, then it reduces that vacuum, and so you're able to, you expel the air that is on the inside. So you inhale, and air moves into your lungs because of the fact that your diaphragm contracts and creates this empty space. And then when the diaphragm relaxes, then you're able to move that air out of your lungs. The nervous system. The nervous system is pretty important because without the nervous system, we couldn't sense the world around us. Your brain is the primary organ of your nervous system, and then the spinal cord, not the vertebral column, but the spinal cord, the nerve cord that runs down the middle of your vertebral column. This would be your primary nerve centers. Okay, so that would be your brain and your spinal cord. And then you have peripheral nerves that go out from the spinal cord all over your body. Now, nervous impulse is an electrical occurrence. So we actually have these cells that surround the long part, or called the axon, of the nerve cell. This is called a neuron. A nerve cell is called a neuron. These cells act like insulation. Okay, they act like insulation. If you think about it, it's like all electrical wire has to be coated with an insulation. Otherwise, if they touch each other, then it creates a short circuit, and the electrical current short circuits, and you don't get it, jumps from one cord to another. Well, the same kind of thing would happen with us if these cells that surround the long nerve axon weren't there. And in fact, when those things wear away and such like that, that's where you do get kind of short circuits, and that creates all sorts of muscular diseases, like muscular dystrophy and things like that. So we have dendrites, which take in signals, and then we have this long axon that sends the signal to the next neuron. So axons carry nervous impulses away from the central part of the cell. So this is the signal from this nerve cell is going to move down this axon and then out here. And then there could be other dendrites from other neurons here, or this might be connected to a muscle or some other organ. Dendrites here, this carries information to the body of the cell. And this is all carried by way of an electrical current. And it's a chemical current it's a chemical change that initiates this electrical current. And this electrical current then moves all the way down this axon until it gets down to here. And then yet again, there's another chemical exchange that starts the process and to the next neuron. So we have our central nervous system, which is your brain and your spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, which are all of the axons that move away from the spinal cord. Without your nervous system, you wouldn't be able to take in any information. You wouldn't be able to see or hear or taste or experience touch. So none of your senses would operate without the nervous system. So it's how we take in, the nervous system is how we take in information from the outside world. Okay, without the nervous system, we would be isolated. The biggest part of your nervous system is, of course, the brain. So you have multiple parts of the brain. The cerebrum, which is the part of the brain that surrounds most of the other parts. Okay, it's the outer portion of the brain that you actually see. Like if you were to pull a brain out of somebody's head, what you would see is you're looking at primarily cerebrum. You see the convoluted, what are called sulci, the convoluted part of the brain. Then we have the cerebellum, which is the region of the brain connected to the medulla oblongata, which is the back of the head back here. And then the medulla oblongata, which is the primitive part of the brain that connects to the spinal cord. And this is going to control your breathing and your heartbeat and whatnot like that. And so it's those things that you don't necessarily have conscious control of. When we think about sensory input, we have chemical detection, which is both taste and smell. Essentially, taste and smell are the same thing. tons and tons of labs that you could do with students with the senses, with taste and smell and touch and sight and things like that. Taste. Uh, we have this idea that kind of originated some time back that different parts of your tongue are only tasting certain things: sweet, salty, bitter, umami. In fact, the entirety of your tongue is covered with taste buds that taste all of these things. You just may have centers that are a little bit more of this taste or that taste, but you actually can taste all of these tastes with all of your tongue. Both smell and taste are chemical reception. When you sniff the air, you're pulling in particles, and they land on an olfactory nerve, and this sends a message to your brain that says, "Oh, that's a this or that's a that." It's the same way when you're on your taste buds, when something hits your tongue, and you're like, "Oh, this is a this or that's a that." Sight, your eyes are the source of where we pull in. This is where we pull in light. We know that there is light, and that light is a reality because of the fact that we evolved eyes. So as light comes into the eye, and then an image is focused, albeit upside down, on the retina in the back of your eye, and so your brain obviously translates that image to a right side up image and gives you an ability to see what your surroundings are. There are two types of cells on the back of your retina. We have rods and we have cones. Cones are the part that are necessary for detecting color. Rods detect black and white, but they're way more light sensitive. That's why when things are dark, we tend to see things in a more black and white if it's dark. Then we have the optic nerve that comes away from the eye, and this sends a visual directly to the brain. Hearing. So when sound is sound is a compressional wave, and that'll make more sense when we have our lecture on waves. But we have these big cups on the side of our head. These big cups on the side of our head collect compressional waves that are coming through the air, and it causes the tympanic membrane, the eardrum, to vibrate back and forth. And when it does that, it moves those three little muscles, three little bones that you've heard about on a regular basis: the hammer, the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup, or the incus, the malleus, and the stapes. And it moves those three bones, which vibrates a liquid inside this organ here, which is called the cochlea. And as it vibrates a liquid inside the cochlea, what happens is it moves little hairs back and forth, and movement of those hairs is what triggers a nervous impulse that goes down the auditory nerve to the brain. So when the liquid in the cochlea vibrates and it moves past those little hairs inside the cochlea, that's what you hear, that's what you sense, or that's what you experience as a sound. Touch. Obviously, the parts of your body that are most sensitive to touch would be like your hands, the tips of your fingers, and such like that. It allows us to feel pressure. It allows us to feel pain. So when you touch something, you can tell whether it's smooth or hard, or if it's bumpy or rough, if it is cold or if it is hot. And so that sensory input goes to our brain, and you can think how quickly that happens. If I pick up something that's hot, and it immediately tells me that I need to drop it. Okay, it immediately tells me I need to drop it. Without thinking, oh, this is hot, I need to drop it, I immediately go to drop it. That's because the signal has gone all the way to my brain and all the way back to my hand without me even thinking about the fact that this is hot, I should drop it. My body knows it's hot, I should drop it. So touch is pretty powerful. So all of that is going to be connected to your skin, okay, because that's the exterior part of your body. And so we have the skin, where your nerve endings are. The excretory system. So we do create a lot of waste, and I've also already talked about the lungs removing carbon dioxide and water vapor. The kidneys have to remove liquid waste in the form of urine, and then the large intestine removes solid waste, and that's more not so much an excretory part, but that is more part of the end of the digestive tract. That's not creating waste, that's getting rid of what wasn't used. Whereas when we think about the excretory system, we're more thinking about a waste product that your body has actually produced. So we've chemically changed things and we've produced this waste. Carbon dioxide is a chemical waste. Urine is a chemical waste that we produce as a result of metabolism. What exits the end of your digestive tract is what's left over after we have pulled nutrients out. There's a slight difference there. So we don't typically talk about that as being part of the excretory system. Your skin removes water and salt in the form of sweat. So we can think about the functional units of the kidneys, which are called nephrons. Whenever you hear nephron, or this is the renal organ. So those are words that you may hear that refer to the kidneys. So we hear renal, that's referring to kidneys. When we hear nephron or nephrates, we're talking about the kidneys. So you have a whole system in your kidneys where as blood moves through your kidneys, there's a whole system of filtration essentially that happens that pulls waste product out of your blood and concentrates that in the form of urine, which then goes to your bladder and then you have to get rid of when you go to the restroom in order to excrete. All right, our circulatory system. Circulatory system is made up of your heart and all of your blood vessels. Big things that I want for you to think about here. Yes, you do have multiple things that are in your blood. Your blood, the liquid part of your blood is called plasma. You have white blood cells that are called erythrocytes. That are called leukocytes. And the white blood cells themselves, they have a nucleus and all of your DNA and everything like that. But white blood cells are primarily acting as part of your immune system. You have erythrocytes, which are your red blood cells. Mature red blood cells don't have a nucleus just because they've lost it. They have it to begin with, and then as they mature as a blood cell, they actually lose that because mature red blood cells don't reproduce themselves. This is what's responsible for gas exchange. They carry oxygen and CO2. And that happens because there is a metal ion inside your hemoglobin, iron, which is what makes your blood red. Now, let's get something straight real quick. Your blood is never blue. Your blood is red because it's based on iron. It is either going to be bright, bright red, or it is going to be dark red or maroonish in color if it is oxygen depleted. Your blood is never blue. Oh, but it's blue here. No, that's not your blood. That's your blood vessels. If we took the blood out of your blood vessels, it would still be blue right there. So your blood is never blue. That little misunderstanding happened as a result of the way that diagrams are drawn showing oxygenated blood being red and deoxygenated blood being blue. But your blood is never blue. If your blood were based on copper, it could be blue. But your blood is not. Your blood is based on iron. And then we have platelets in the blood. This causes your blood to be able to clot, so that when you have a cut or an injury of some sort, then you create clots there. Your heart has 4 chambers. You have 4 chambers in your heart: right and left atrium, right and left ventricle. The atria are the 2 at the top on the anterior end of your heart, and on the ventral end of your heart are the 2 ventricles. Pathway through the heart, deoxygenated blood comes into the right atrium, then flows to the right ventricle. So it comes here and comes to the right ventricle, where it then flows to the lungs,